to Good Night with George Galloway. This is a series of weekly podcasts dealing with great issues, dealing with small issues, dealing with expected and the unexpected. Today we're going to be talking about Syria. I have been plagued for months, in fact over a year, by people claiming that I'm not saying anything about Syria. What in fact they mean is that I'm not saying what they want to hear about Syria. So willfully deaf, they have assumed a posture that I'm somehow avoiding this issue. Even though all you have to do is type in the words George Galloway plus Syria into YouTube, into Google, and you'll find writings and broadcasting, radio and television about the subject. But they don't want to hear what I've got to say, and so they pretend that I'm not saying anything at all. So I thought that in these podcasts, which are attracting massive audiences, something like 2,000 hits a day for an hour-long political podcast, which is pretty remarkable, this was probably the best place to showcase exactly where I stand. I warn you in advance that you might not like what I've got to say. I certainly warn many of my friends that they won't like everything that I've got to say. And I warn my foes that they definitely won't like what I've got to say. But you're going to hear it anyway. A health warning too in this regard. I have never been a supporter of the Syrian regime. In fact, how could I be if you think about it? Having spent most of the best years of my life as a comrade of Yasser Arafat, I was with him through a whole long series of betrayals by the previous president of Syria, Hafez al-Assad, the father of the current president, Bashar al-Assad. I was with Arafat when the Syrian regime was murdering Palestinian leaders and killing Palestinian civilians in refugee camps. In fact, on my first ever visit to Lebanon in 1977, my first encounter with Palestinian refugees was with the orphans of a camp called Tal al-Zatar. This camp had been destroyed by a combined force of the Lebanese fascist forces and the forces of the Syrian regime. And the orphans that I was therefore comforting were the victims of parents who'd been slain by the Hafez al-Assad regime and its intervention in the Lebanese civil war in the mid-1970s. So profound was that experience that it became my first, if you like, operation in support of the Palestinian people. I met the children, the orphans, who had a bagpipe band. Scottish bagpipes are very popular amongst the Palestinian people and indeed across that region in general. And I then collected 12 sets of bagpipes from all over Scotland and shipped them to the orphans of Tal al-Zatar, so they had Scottish bagpipes to play. I have a house, by the grace of God, in the southwest of Portugal, in the Algarve, almost as far west as you can go. The name of the house is Tal al-Zatar. That's how marked I was by this, my first evidence, my first example of the perfidy of the Syrian regime. Secondly, I got used to being accused of being some kind of Iraqi. I was not, of course, some kind of Iraqi, but in the division between Syria and Iraq in Ba'ath Party politics, I was with Iraq rather than with Syria. I refused to heap praise on the late Hafez al-Assad when invited to do so by the Syrian media. But I did express the hope that Bashar would be different from his father and better than his father. And in the first years of Bashar al-Assad's rule, I did praise not just the reforms that he had declared he was going to implement, but also praised Syria's stand on the Arab international issues of the day, particularly in relation to the resistance in Lebanon, Hezbollah, and the headquartering of the Palestinian resistance, Hamas principally, but also many other Palestinian resistance groups in Damascus. I praised the fact that Syria under Bashar opposed the Crusader war against Iraq. And I praised the fact that the Assad regime, as indeed the previous Assad regime, had refused to sign a surrender peace with Israel and to relinquish and give up their territory, their occupied territory in the Golan. So please don't depart from the premise that I am some kind of supporter of the Syrian regime. The Syrian regime has never done anything for me. For the avoidance of doubt, not only have they never given me a cent, not a cent, actually, they probably owe me money for visits to Damascus that I made at their invitation, and which they didn't even reimburse. So this has nothing to do with interest. I don't do things for interest. My stand is this, that the Syrian people have a right, as any people has a right, to rise up against their government. If they live in an absence of democracy, in an authoritarian state, under a dictatorship, one-party rule, mukhabarat, secret police everywhere, not only have they a right, they probably, inescapably, will have an obligation to rise up against their government violently, because their government will not allow them to rise up peacefully. I have no problem about the fact that there is a Syrian revolution. What I will not accept and never will support is the Crusader colonial occupying powers from Bilad al-Sham, the land of Sham, Syria, this citadel of Arabism, of Arab nationalism, being the subject of a Crusader invasion and intervention. I will never support it. The Syrians have a right to rise up against their government. They don't have a right to demand that I support sending my country's armed forces to bomb their country and kill their people and reoccupy their land. I will never support this. There is a revolution in Syria. It is a genuine upsurge of a people rejecting dictatorship, as all the Arabs are now doing, and I hope will do. But there is also a foreign Crusader Zionist conspiracy against Syria. These are two inescapable truths, and they do not contradict each other. So, for someone like me, what to do? What to do when the friends of liberty and freedom, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, I can hardly use these words in the context of supporting freedom and democracy, when Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Israel and the United States and France and the United Kingdom are all involved in arming, financing, proselytizing for, propagandizing for, wheeling and dealing on the international stage to isolate the regime in Syria and to bring about its downfall, how can someone like me support that. It's an absurd proposition. The truth is, these people hate the Syrian regime for a different reason than many Syrians hate it. And if these people are successful in bringing down the Syrian regime, the outcome can only be one in their interest rather than in the interests of the Syrian people, still less the Arab people as a whole. What do I mean? Well, you think Mrs. Clinton and William Hague, President Obama and David Cameron, you think they hate the Syrian regime because it's one family rule? All of their friends in the region are one family rule. Every single member of the Kuwaiti government is a member of the same family. One family rule. The Al Saud family even gave their name to their country, Saudi Arabia. I mean, even Kim Jong-il didn't change the name of North Korea to his family name. I mean, if Kim Jong-il had renamed North Korea Kim Jong-ilia, would we have accepted such a ridiculous absurdity? No, but we have accepted it in the case of the one family rule in so-called Saudi Arabia. It cannot be because they don't like the Syrian regime because it's a dictatorship, because all of their friends in the region are dictators. It cannot be because of the lack of freedom and liberty in Syria, a lack which there very definitely is and has been for more than 40 years. Because in all of their friendly dictatorships, there is no freedom and liberty at all. So what can it be? Here's why they hate Syria. They hate the Syrian regime because it has refused to sign a surrender peace with Israel and relinquish its territory, the Golan. They hate the Syrian regime because it headquartered the Palestinian resistance for decades when no other Arab dictatorship would do so. Hamas is now enjoying life in Doha. Everybody seems to be enjoying life in Doha. I'm not myself. I'm banned from there because I speak the truth. But for decades, none of these Arab dictatorships would have anything to do with Hamas. If they could have destroyed Hamas, they would have done so. But they were based in Damascus and fed from the table of the Syrian regime. And the same is true of many other Palestinian resistance groups. The Western leaders hate the Syrian regime because it will not break its relations with the Lebanese national resistance and its leading edge, Hezbollah. The only Arab army ever to defeat Israel on the battlefield. How did they manage it? Because Syria assisted them. Without Syrian assistance, they could not have become as strong as they are. And they could not have defeated Israel in arms. They did so because of the heroism, bravery, and leadership of the Lebanese national resistance itself, but also because of the logistical support given by Syria. That's the reason why Israel and America and Britain and France hate the Syrian regime. They hate it because it refused to allow Syria to be a base for the Crusader invasion and occupation of Iraq. And perhaps above all, they hate the Syrian regime because it will not play the sectarian game of cutting its relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran and to further isolate Iran. This war, which they are fighting through their proxies in Al-Qaeda, in the Free Syrian Army and all these other groups, they are using these proxies to fight this war not against Syria but against Iran, because they're preparing a big cataclysmic attack, war, which will reverberate throughout the world. And for as long as I am alive, and maybe for as long as you are alive, I tell you, dear viewers, we could be on the eve of destruction in this region. So that, dear viewers, is what it's about. It's about preparing the way for a Zionist crusader attack on the Islamic Republic of Iran. Having supported Saddam Hussein's war against Iran, the Western countries now want us to agree to attack and, if necessary, occupy and regime change Iran. They see the existence of an independent Syrian Arab government which refuses their orders as a vital prop of Iran's position in the region, and they are determined to break that away. And they are ready, as they were previously in Afghanistan in the 1980s, to use any and all methods at their disposal. Let's take a look at some of those. I'm not saying, by the way, that many, maybe even most, of the people fighting in Syria against the regime are not Syrians. But a vital component of the armed force which is trying to bring down the Syrian regime are foreign forces. And they are exactly the same kind of fanatic, jihadist, Salafist, Islamist extremist forces that the West deployed against the government, latterly of Najibullah, in Afghanistan and brought it down. And that, dear viewer, ineluctably leads us to the Al-Qaeda question. The West created Al-Qaeda. Osama bin Laden was an agent of the West. His people were trained, even here in the United Kingdom, physically trained in Fort William in the north of Scotland. The Al-Qaeda Mujahideen, as they were called at the time, freedom fighters, as they were called at the time, were agents of the West. Their weapons came from the West. Their money came from the West. The propaganda and diplomatic support that they had all came from the West. The West operated on the immoral principle that my enemy's enemy is my friend. But sometimes your enemy's enemy is worse than your enemy. And certainly if you read the book Frankenstein, written by my compatriot Mary Shelley, right to the end, you discover that when you create a monster, it breaks free of your control. And that's exactly what happened with Al-Qaeda, wasn't it? Do I need to tell my viewers in the United States what Al-Qaeda did to you? Do I need to tell you? Do I need to remind you about the blood of the thousands of Americans that these people caused to run into the ash and the sand on 9/11? Well, did you know that your government is now back in league with these people? Did you know that Saudi Arabia and Qatar, two agents of the United States, are supplying the wherewithal to Al-Qaeda to destroy churches, to kill Christians, to kill Shiites in Syria in order to bring down the regime? Because that's what they're doing. You see, one of the characteristics of Syria, one of the few good things about Syria under its current regime, is that it is a melting pot of religions, ethnicities, and different confessions. And these Al-Qaeda types hate that. They hate the fact that the Christians in Syria have more protection, are more honored, are better presented and defended in Syria than in any other Arab country. If you don't believe me, go to Saudi Arabia, look for a church. Go to Saudi Arabia, go to the prisons, see the Filipino maids in prison for wearing a crucifix or for celebrating Mass. The punishment can be death. In Syria, there are churches everywhere. Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Maronite. The Christians have a treasured place in Syria. You think Al-Qaeda likes that? Well, we know they hate that, but why is America helping them to destroy that precious piece of ecumenical cohesion which exists, or at least has existed, in Syria? These Al-Qaeda types hate Shiites, and the minority Shiite population in Syria is terrified of a Syria ruled by that type of political force. Women in Syria are terrified at what it would be like to go from living in a Syrian Arab Republic led by an Arab nationalist force, albeit a dictatorship, to one ruled by the adherents, the devotees of Osama bin Laden. If you're a woman watching this, you probably already grasp what I'm driving at. How life would change. The Kurdish minority in Syria is terrified of living in a Syria ruled by these Al-Qaeda types. And very belatedly, the Syrian regime has granted autonomy to its Kurdish population on the borders of where? On the borders of Turkey, a member of NATO, and the base camp, the principal base camp through which this international conspiracy against Syria is being practiced. And of course, the Al-Qaeda types, and indeed the Free Syrian Army, though you will quickly find that there's not much of an army about them, and certainly no single leadership or line of control or order of battle, has already promised that the new Syria they hope to bring about will instantly break its relations with the Lebanese national resistance and with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Thus, at a stroke, serving Israel in every regard. So the stakes are very high. And as I said in my last podcast on pirates, in a battle between the big pirates, the big tyrants, and the small pirates, the small tyrants, I will defend the small against the big, because the big are a bigger danger by definition to the rest of us. And that's why Russia and why China are refusing to facilitate a Libya-style operation under the flag of the United Nations to destroy Syria and to break down the Syrian regime. Not because they love Bashar, not because they are Baathists, but because they can see that a victory for the big pirate will make the big pirate bigger and stronger and more aggressive, more ravenous for further victories. That's why Russia has stood by the Kofi Annan plan. I speak in the week in which Kofi Annan has finally had to resign in disgust at the way that, though he was acting officially for the United Nations and acting for the Arab League, in fact, huge sections of the United Nations and almost all of the Arab League were working daily, hourly to undermine his efforts. And his efforts were noble, and his plan was a good one. It would have, could have led, might yet lead to political transition in Syria without foreign occupation, without foreign intervention, so that the Syrians themselves freely can determine their future. And if they were allowed to do so, the outcome would be better. If you think foreign invasion brings about freedom and liberty, look at what happened in Iraq next door. Do you want Syria to end as Iraq has ended? If the answer to that is no, then it is ludicrous for you to be lined up with Netanyahu, with the US, the UK, France, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. There are a lot of leftists watching this who imagine that all these big powers have all got it wrong. Yeah? That all these big powers inadvertently are supporting something good. Do you really believe that? In the darkness of the night, when you're searching your soul, you really believe that Israel is supporting the same outcome as you, and that it's Israel that's wrong? Might it be you that's wrong? Israel will be the primary beneficiary of the downfall of the Syrian regime. It will be a mighty blow to the Palestinian people and their right to recover their land, their right to return to their homes. Palestine's still the issue, you know, and I will never leave the battle for a free Palestine. I will never leave the battle for the liberation of the Palestinian people, even if some of the Palestinian liberation organizations clearly have other priorities. Me, I'm with low-key, free Palestine. So there we have it. Let me summarize what it is that I'm trying to say. I'm not with the Syrian regime, but I'm against their enemies. And I'm against their enemies more than I'm against them. I want political transition in Syria. I want the end of one-party rule. I want a transition to democratic, free life in Syria. But I want to preserve that which was good about Syria, its Arab national character, its lack of sectarianism, its ability for all faiths to live together in harmony, its stand against capitulation, against the loss not only of the Golan, but of the loss of Jerusalem itself. I am in no doubt as to why, of all the dictatorships against which a jihad could have been launched, that the fact that the jihad has been launched against the one Arab country that has refused to surrender to Israel is no accident. That there is no jihad by these Islamists against the other Arab dictatorships that have surrendered and are openly collaborating with Israel is no accident. I'm for the end of dictatorship throughout the Arab world, from the Atlantic to the Gulf. And I'm for doing it, if we can, peacefully and through negotiation, through mass political action. But if that proves impossible, I absolutely accept the right of any of the Arab people to take up arms against their regimes. But I will not support crusader intervention and occupation of the Arab lands. I have fought it all of my life. I believe that the mark, the stain of colonialism is the stain, the original sin, which has left the Arabs, 350 million of them, in such misery for almost a century. And I will not support going quietly back into that good night. I will not support sectarianism in the Muslim world. I believe there is one Islam, there is one Quran, and above all, there is one God. I will not accept the isolating of one part of this Islamic Ummah for the edification and the entertainment of the others. I will not support the isolation of Iran. Iran is being isolated, not because of the flaws and the imperfections and the mistakes and even, yes, the crimes that have been committed there by the government. I will not support the isolation of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran is not being isolated for anything bad that has happened there or is happening there. Iran is being isolated because it has taken a stand against imperialist domination in the Muslim world, a stand against interference, a stand against the Zionist entity and its endless crimes against the Palestinian people. That's why it's nothing to do with Shiism. Some idiots keep writing on Facebook and elsewhere that I am supporting Syria and Iran because I am a Shiite. I am not a Shiite. I'm supporting the Bahraini People's Revolution because it's right. I'm supporting Iran against the plots to isolate and destroy it because it's right. And I'm supporting the defense of the integrity of the Syrian entity, its people and its society because it's right to do so. I don't make these distinctions. As I said many times, I believe there is one God, there is one Islam, there is one Quran. And I will not support the idea that the Muslims can be segmented, divided, sliced up like salamis to make them weaker. And if you are a sincere Muslim in this Ramadan watching that, you must accept that that's what the game is, unless you think America and Israel and Britain and France have all got it wrong. That by some weird, perverse coincidence, they have happened upon a course of action which is against their own interests. They have not. They know their own interests very well, even if you do not. Even if you do not understand that having divided the Arabs by Sykes-Picot and Balfour in the 20th century, they are now trying to divide you in the 21st century on the basis of this poisonous, rancid, murderous sectarianism. I will not go along with it. I'm for making one hand of all the people who are victims of imperialist design. That's where I stand. And I close on this. Capitalism needs war. It needs, in its military-industrial complex, endless war. They have to run down their inventories. They have to resupply those inventories at vast profit for the multinational arms corporations and the arms dealers, the merchants of death. For them, this Syrian imbroglio is a fantastic event. Every bullet that's fired has to be replaced. Every weapon that's used has to be reordered. Every new trick on the military front that can be devised has to be practiced. And it's now being practiced. And the blood is flowing in the streets of Aleppo and Damascus and Homs and Hama and elsewhere in Syria, as it was in Libya before that, as it was in Iraq before that. Can't you see what these people are doing? Can't you see what these masters of war are up to? I hope that after this podcast, you'll at least have the opportunity to reflect that you might be wrong and that I might be right. A long time ago, a very great genius, Bob Dylan, wrote this song, which kind of sums it all up for me. This has been Good Night with George Galloway. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. I hope it's been food for thought. You can write to me at redmalacca@gmail.com. You can post. You can dialogue with me in many different ways. On Facebook, go to George Galloway MP. Follow me on Twitter at George Galloway. You can be a subscriber to the Red Malacca channel just by clicking a button. And then you'll know exactly what I'm saying and what I am doing. Whether you like it or not, you might find it interesting. You can download the Gallo app free from iTunes and elsewhere. Won't cost you anything, but it will be a running record of the interventions that I'm trying to make. So I'm sorry to anyone who was disappointed by my point of view on this, and I know that you won't be slow in telling me. But I hope you also know that I will never say what I don't mean, and I will always mean what I say, and I'll always say what I mean. This has been George Galloway. Good night with George Galloway. Good night to you.